Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee on Tuesday, the 2nd of December. To receive apologies for absence. I don't believe we have any.
No apologies, Chair.
Excellent, and therefore no substitutes. Public questions, we do not have any. Items of urgent business, I'm not aware of any. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest they need to make? No. The minutes of the last meeting, please. Has everyone had a chance to read them? Has anyone got any comments on them at all? I had one comment on them, and that was relating to the letter that we sent at the end, and I thought where it goes into urgent business, there wasn't any title there. So if you were reading these minutes and didn't know what that was all about, you might be a bit confused. So I've asked if a title could be put there, you know, letter to the comptroller. Okay. Is everyone happy with that amendment? Could I then have a proposer and a seconder for acceptance, please? Thank you, Councillor Boyle and Councillor Fletcher. So we move on to the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee update and action list on page 19. So we had a little debate about this in our pre-meeting. I don't remember this having the item number 2 on page 19, 2 of 7. I don't remember that having been closed off before. Does anyone else remember it being closed off? I don't remember seeing anything. So I think that action is still open and we need to get that closed out. Now, it's got down as the person responsible is the HIA, but it isn't the HIA's responsibility. It's somebody within this organisation's responsibility. So I'm looking to you, gentlemen, as to a suggestion of who that might be delegated to, please. Page 19. Yeah, of 7. Yes, thank you.
I think our standard process is to identify an assistant director level role, and if that is to do with the property assets, which it appears to be, unfortunately I'm not familiar with this particular action point, then I would propose Dan King take that action.
So can you ask them
Yes.
to let us have a written update, please? That's been going on quite a lot.
And I also understand that perhaps the head of internal audit can come in on this point, is that there's an internal audit work plan for scheduled maintenance, and whether that may have an impact on the date of that report.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there is a planned preventative maintenance audit now taking place. So in relation to that item. I've lost the page. I don't know. The audit's about planned preventative maintenance. So is that?
If we keep the action that Dan King will provide a written response within 1 month, and we'll update the committee if there are reasons to postpone that because of the internal audit programme, rather than give half an answer in a month, if a full answer can be given in 2.
No, that sounds perfect. Thank you. The annual governance statement and local code of corporate governance, to provide a copy of the project management framework provision, item 9. We have gentlemen here to give us a report on that later on in the agenda. So that will be that item covered. We may decide we want to add something in after we've heard that report, but let's see. And the draft financial statements, that there was an written update provided by Don, and you should all have received that. If not, it is in the minutes, as you will have seen on page 16. Okay, does anyone else have any questions arising from all that little list? Mr. Platten.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general observation on this form, which I find really helpful, but as someone that's not steeped in the background to this, I'd find it perhaps more helpful if I knew when the action was initiated. So I then get a sense as to is this being bumped and bumped and bumped, or is it something that was raised at the last meeting, and therefore potentially how much I need to care about it. Thank you.
I think that's a reasonable point. Could you mend the list? And I was also going to ask the actions that we've closed out. Maybe there's two lists, but we only see the one with the actions that we actually need to be focusing on at each meeting, rather than keep having to trawl through pages of actions that have been closed out. Does that make sense to everybody on the committee? Okay, lovely. So we'll make those two changes. Yeah. Also, if we go to item 15 on page 20, the self-assessment. Apparently there's also now some training to bring us all up to date regarding the processes. We wondered about on the 24th of March, which is our next substantive meeting in the agenda, whether we made it a GRAC day and did 2 hours in the morning, sort of immediately prior to lunch, and then obviously break for lunch and then come and do GRAC in the afternoon. But rather than people coming in once for training and once for the meeting, whether that would suit people. I don't know what people's preferences are, if anyone has a preference. Yes. Well,
Yeah.
my take was if we're coming to the council offices anyway, we might as well do everything in one. But I
Let's
don't
have
know.
a nice lunch. That'd be good.
We can ask, but is everyone happy with that? Just have to, you know. Yes. Yeah, we'll put flags out for you and pretty coloured lights. Okay, so we move on. Update on the 24-25 external audit of the council's financial statements. To receive an update from the council's external auditor, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. This is a verbal update. What I thought I'd do is just recap on the June committee, just to remind you where we got to in terms of the audit, talk through what we've done since, and then talk about what we're doing now and what will come to the next committee. So the audit plan for 24-25, this is the audit of your 24-25 financial statements and forming a value for money conclusion. Issued back in June, and that was reported with 6 risks on the financial statements and 1 risk on the VFM conclusion. So they were the areas where we would be doing additional focus when carrying out the actual audit procedures. Since the plan, we've then worked through the remainder of the scope and strategy work, walkthroughs, which essentially is getting an understanding of your financial systems and documenting them, and working through value for money arrangements. We've agreed working paper requirements with the finance team and provided some additional enablement just to try and support the team in terms of producing the right evidence first time. The aim being to maximise the completion of planned procedures. And you recall that this is important for North Norfolk, as it is with all councils, but for North Norfolk, the last full audit that you received was 2021. Due to delays in publishing of accounts and also the new legislation that the government put in place. So the audit of the 24-25 accounts, the final element of the audit, has now commenced. It's been running for a couple of weeks. I think what's important is there is still a backstop date. That backstop date is the end of February. we essentially have limited time and limited capacity. So the way that we can maximise assurance is essentially by getting everything right first time. Whenever there are delays or issues, and that will impact upon what we're able to complete in terms of the audit. Now, we're in constant discussion with the finance team, flagging areas where maybe the working papers aren't right first time, and there's a few areas we're just working with the finance team in terms of how we progress that, because what I don't want is finance team and even my team spending time on areas which actually we don't get to a point of concluding, at the risk of not concluding other areas where we can conclude that work. So there's that kind of debate going on. So in terms of what you will see when we come to the next committee, so I'll bring my audit results report, and that will be the detailed findings from the audit of the 24-25 accounts. And that's when I'll set out all of the findings from the work we've performed. Within that report, there will be a detailed assessment on essentially the council's arrangements to prepare accounts and support an audit across different criteria. It will list out all of the significant accounts from the statement of accounts, and it will tell you whether we've got green assurance, i.e. we've rebuilt, we're happy with it. Partial assurance, where potentially there's historical issues that we haven't rebuilt, but we've done enough in year to get assurance over what was in year transactions, or red, where we haven't been able to rebuild assurance in that year. What we'll also do is include an appendice, and that appendice will set out the trajectory to return to a clean opinion as set out in NEO guidance, and it will plot where Norfolk are in relation to that trajectory. So it'll kind of start to give you an idea as to when we would expect to regain full assurance on Norfolk's statement of accounts. So that will all be set out in the report that I bring to the next committee, and I'll walk you through that report as and when it is issued. And I'm happy to take any questions on anything I've said there, or just general understanding of where the local public audit and financial reporting framework is at the moment.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask on this? Councillor Penfold.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find anything. I don't know whether it was missing in our agenda pack. It's just not.
It's not missing. It was just a verbal update.
It was just a verbal update. Thank you. So did I catch that you said that our last full audited account was 2021? So what's those missing years? Where are we with those essentially? Or where are you with those?
Yep. So the context here, huge backlog across the whole sector, not just Norfolk, across the whole sector. So 2021 accounts, I wasn't actually part of that. That wasn't my audit year, but I think they weren't signed off until 2023 or 2024. So reflecting that huge backlog, the government are following independent reviews and all of the reasons that were driving this, and there were numerous reasons driving this, from capacity within finance teams, capacity within audit, overcomplicated financial reporting frame. There was lots and lots of different reasons. Introduced statutory regulations, which essentially put a backstop in place. Hit the backstop, disclaim, conclude the audit. Previous to that, essentially, we just carried on. And that's why you had such long delays. So 2021 was essentially the last full year that we could complete ahead of the first backstop date. So the 3 years subsequent to that essentially hit backstop dates before we had the time to come in and do an audit. So they went what we call straight to disclaim. So essentially, we weren't able to form a view on those opinions, and we issued a disclaimer of opinions. It's 24-25, first year where we're actually now back in trying to start to rebuild assurance. How that gap then kind of comes forward. In 25-26, we will do a risk assessment to see where the gaps are, and then start to rebuild those historic elements. In 24-25, if we can get through the work and get through the accounts, we will already start to rebuild. So as soon as we start doing work, we are starting to rebuild. But essentially, even those missing years, something will need to be done in order for us to get assurance on eventually the year-end reserves position and the balance sheet area.
Yeah, thank you. I think I understand that. So the backstop no longer exists. So we shouldn't be in this position again. Is that what you're saying? We shouldn't have a backlog.
Shouldn't have a backlog
In the future built up like we have had.
Shouldn't have a backlog, but there's a backstop for the next 3 financial years, and depending on how successful the sector is, there might be further backstops forward going forward. So for 24-25, the backstop is the end of February 2026. And that's what I mean in terms of I've got limited resources, limited capacity. If there are any issues in terms of the working papers or we find issues on the statement of accounts, then I won't be able to conclude those areas. And again, they will feature in my audit report.
So I'm
This
just
is-
concerned we're going to keep piling up in 2027, 28. We might be saying our last accounts was 2021.
2021 was closed, done. But the whole sector, not just North Norfolk, but across the whole of the UK. And for varieties of reasons, some of it was down to COVID, but not all of it. Some of it was down to auditor capacity across the whole of the UK, not just in Norfolk. There's been a huge amount of contributing factors. I don't like it any more than you do. I don't think any of us do. But we are stuck with where we are. I have to say, when I was reading different papers, I was concerned about how long we may still go on with disclaimed reports. And I would like an assurance, please, that everything is absolutely being done to get us to a place where we can have a full audit that is acceptable, both from Don and from yourself, David, please. I just need to know, is there anything we can be doing as an audit committee to make sure that we keep, on track to get things improved?
Both the finance team and the audit team are engaging constructively. There's open dialogue where there's clarification needed in the audit requests. We're seeking that clarification so that when the audit team sit down and try and do the audit, they have the best chance of having all the information at that time. Because as David rightly says, it's a very limited window, and they have one runner each section. And if a section looks like it's not quite there or quite meets the expectation, the auditors have explained they will move on. We have other challenges in a relatively recently formed finance team. There's lots of people who've never been audited before in our finance team, so it's a learning experience, and we're trying to support those officers where we can. And I think what David alluded to, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I've misunderstood or misrepresent it, because those balance sheets have not been audited every year for the last 3 years, then the opening balances on the 1st of April 2024 are not certain because they haven't done all the tests. Hence, even if we had perfect audits for the next 3 years, everything had full assurance, there would still be some question marks over those opening balances because there's no plan to go back and do those 3 years that were just signed off with a disclaimed opinion. So it will take several years for that to work through, and I'll invite David to come in, but I assume that for key areas of materiality, there'll be additional tests like fixed asset additions. You'd go through and go, right, we really need to get this number right. We will go back and look at that, but where there's debtors that have been repaid or written off, then we might take a view. It depends what's still on the balance sheet in 4 years' time from now.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. What I would say is I think the optimum time of returning to a clean opinion is 3 years. So we have got some audits that maybe only had 1 year where we didn't do an audit. We've completed plan procedures every year, and the working papers and the accounts are A class. There's no issues coming out of them, and those potentially can turn clean within 3 years. For others, the timescales will depend on how successful we are at kind of completing the plan procedures we're doing at the moment, but also plugging that gap that Don was talking about. In terms of capacity, so I'm comfortable. I've got enough audit resources. In fact, the resources we've got plugged in here are probably 50% more than you had in 2021. So we've got more than enough resources, but it will depend on the quality of what we get and whether we find any issues. the bar has risen again. So the audit now is different to what was done in 2021. That's why we've tried to support the audit, the finance team as well, because the bar continuously moves. You know, we've got two auditing standards that haven't been audited before in relation to 2024, 25. I think there's 3 or 4 accounting standards that have also had an impact on 24, 25 that haven't been looked at previously. So it's kind of a different audit to what was done in 2021, but we're doing what we can with the finance team to maximise it. I think for North Norfolk, a win will be A, you get an audit, and B, when you look at your balance sheet, significant accounts, at least a good proportion of them have turned green, because then you're starting to move forward, as opposed to last year when I had to say, well, I'm disclaiming, and each of those would have been red because I've got no assurance on them.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Do I see it in the corporate risk register, this delay, and should I? Thank you.
It's a good question. I don't know, but we'll have a look when we get to the risk register a bit later. And if not, if we can't find it, then maybe we should be adding it. Although, well, it's a risk. It's a
Well,
risk.
It has implications for other elements in the corporate risk register.
It
if
does
not
have.
outside, so I would have thought it should be raised. Thank you.
Councillor Cushing.
Yes, well, great minds think alike. I was going to ask whether we actually ought to be adding a risk for a black hole in our finances to the corporate risk register.
I've seen some councils add it as a risk. I think you need to think what the risk is, because the external audit should be the final check. So all of your other internal procedures should give you assurance that your statement of accounts are accurate and correct. When I come in, I should be coming in and basically ticking them and saying, yep, that's correct. So if you kind of add a risk that you've got a black hole, you're kind of indicating that you've got a risk in your own internal procedures in terms of how that's giving you assurance over those draft financial statements. So I'm not saying you wouldn't have a risk, but I think you just need to think how the risk would be pitched and what you do to mitigate it, because if the mitigation is, oh, well, we're putting extra procedures to make sure our reconciliations work, that should already be in place. Do you see what I mean?
And we don't want to delay the work that's being done. Otherwise, you can't check it because you'll run out of time if it's delayed because we're adding things. It's a vicious circle. I can understand what you're saying, but it's a vicious circle. But sorry.
But surely that doesn't add any work to the external auditor, does it? The fact that we have it on our corporate risk register, because that work is done internally, isn't it?
No, but if what we're saying is if we create a risk, then we have to make sure we put in actions to mitigate that risk. And if those actions are to add more checks and balances or whatever it be, then those will take more time for the people that are doing them to do, which might mean that by the time they get the report to the auditors, it's later. Because at the moment we're running up against a brick wall for our accounts for sign off in February, aren't we? The time because of our ability to provide those reports. Councillor Cushing.
If there's a risk there, I mean, it could be that we add a risk, but the mitigation is the work that's being done by the auditors in order to check that the accounts are correct. All I'm saying is if we suddenly find actually there is a black hole there, we're going to be sitting here with egg on our face because we didn't actually wave a red flag saying there might be one. Now, what you told me before, you don't think there would be, but it may not be high risk, but a risk is a risk.
I may come in on that. By black hole, if you're referring to an asset that's overvalued or a liability that's undervalued, one, we have processes and financial controls to help mitigate those risks. Secondly, the external audit will focus on the most material transactions and balances in our balance sheet to avoid that risk, because even giving limited assurance, if there's a big number that that is uncertain, I don't think David will be able to give assurance. And so with every will in the world, we want to get assurance on those big numbers. So we'll start with the big numbers, if I was the external auditor, and work my way through to the less material ones.
Just to add one, so where I have seen it at risk on the risk register is more from the angle of the impact it may have in the council's relationships with stakeholders, the fact that they've got a disclaimed opinion. And just looking through that as to whether there's any impact with any of the dealings that the council would have with major stakeholders. I've not seen any come up, but that's the risk that's been identified in terms of how do we need to mitigate that.
Mr. Platten.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to continue this, but what was going through my mind is what's the trade-off here? What's the equation between the consequences of a disclaimed opinion and some of the issues going wrong potentially with the audit and the effort you might need to expend to, it's your point, Chair, about the effort you might need to expend to mitigate that. And if you understand that equation more fully, you can identify whether or not it's worth doing something. I'm not cited on what the scale of the risk might be and what, for example, a disclaimed opinion means in practice. But if there's a risk, for example, that jeopardizes your relationship with central government or key stakeholders or whatever, then it probably should be on the risk register and we should probably be taking mitigating action. But I don't understand the equation fully, so not best place to judge. I'm just asking a question about what does that equation look like? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ritter.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have all the figures for the equation because we need to do the 24-25 accounts and then we can start to size it up a little bit because we haven't looked for 3 years. But I think I come back to the point that when the draft accounts are issued by the council, they're issued on the basis that they are materially correct. So even before external audit have looked at them. So I think it's a case of, are you content with the internal procedures you've got within the council, within each of the different services, the assurance you get from internal audit reviews? Are you assured that actually there are appropriate controls in place to mitigate those significant issues that you're kind of talking about?
I think if there weren't those controls in place, then we'd all be rather alarmed because it's public money that we're dealing with. So personally, I'm content to stay where we are at the moment, but I'm happy to go to a vote on whether we should add a risk or not, if people would like to do that. Sorry, would you like to say that with your microphone on so people, it can be recorded properly?
Sorry, the watching public, that was a whisper. I think we would like to go to a vote because if it were me personally, I'd put it on the risk register.
Okay, so all those in favour of adding to the risk register the potential of a problem relating to this, raise your hands. 2. All those against? Or content to stay as we are for now? Okay, I suggest we review again once we've got the 24-25 return and then see where we go from there. Mr. Hems.
So corporate leadership team regularly reviews the risks that are on the corporate risk register. What I would suggest is that we have a discussion at the next time we review that, in any case, as the normal course of business, and then effectively we'll form a view internally as well as to whether we need to look at those risks to add to the risk register.
I think that's a good idea. Then we can bring the two points of view back together at the next meeting. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. I think that was a useful discussion. Does anyone have any other questions about what was brought up? Councillor Penfold.
Sorry, I was just saying, in those missing years, and sorry for the direct question here, were you doing disclaimer years? You said they were, I think. Were you doing the same amount of work that you would normally be doing in the years, say, where you were able to sign off eventually? My question is around the fee that we pay, obviously, to you as an external.
We've been through this quite extensively.
Forgive me.
But
just humour me.
I can answer it relatively briefly. Yeah. So no, so we didn't do a full audit in those years because of basically the time would have not allowed. I think in 2 of those years, your accounts were produced literally just up to the backstop date. We did do procedures, so value for money we still had to do. We still had to see, it sounds bizarre, but to disclaim an audit, there are certain things we still have to do, like the planning and the understanding of your controls and your risks. So we issued audit plans and we did value for money. We did do some limited procedures on the accounts in terms of what do they agree to your general ledger? Are they compliant with the disclosure checklist issued by SITFA? And that was all reported. So no for that bit. In terms of the fee angle, that was determined by PSAA. So people that you procure through, they determine what the fees were for those years.
There was quite a discussion about both internal and external audit fees for that period, and what was reasonable and fair. Because again, if you were paying that bill as you were paying it at home, you'd want to understand where that money had gone, which is not unreasonable when we're paying other people's money out. Okay, is everyone content and we can move on? Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we move to the internal audit progress and follow-up report. Over to Teresa to update us.
Yes, this is our first progress report for 25-26. So starting on page 26, this gives us a good overview of where we are. We've got 11 audits this year to complete. We've got 3 that have been finalised, which we've got the executive summaries in Appendix 2. And then there's one draft report that's been issued. So that's all the Q1 and 2 audits. And then Q3 and 4 are in progress. The Q4 are the ones that have yet to start. We've got 34 outstanding recommendations, so we are starting to move on those now, which is good to see. We've got 1 limited report, which you'll see the environmental health one on licensing, which has got an urgent recommendation, which you might want to ask some questions about. We've got one, I'll stay a bit further back. We've got 1 cancelled audit, which is the budget setting and control audit, which it was decided at the last review that we didn't need to be doing that one anymore. And there is another one that will be cancelled, which kind of happened after the report came out. So there's an audit down for an applications audit on the HR system. That didn't get upgraded, so there's no need to do that audit. And another audit has been put forward for Q4, which is on the statutory compliance checks on temporary accommodation. That was agreed at the last review of the audit plan with management. Otherwise, happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go first? Anyone? Councillor Fletcher. Could you use your microphone, please?
Thanks for do that. This is about the licensing. Sorry, this is about the licensing on page 39 and 40, 39, 41 really. There's obviously a huge amount of, well, a relatively large amount of money still owing, £37,350 for fees for licenses that hasn't been recouped, and that's one thing, and also it seems that the grace period allowed to pay a license, which is again on page 41, is not as tightly observed as it might be. I mean, these are perhaps 2 different things. So the question really is, first of all, you know, what progress has there been in recouping this fairly considerable amount of license money? And the other one is really about the fact that can we restore a situation where a person buying a license, sorry, when licenses are renewed regularly enough to make the bearers of them certain that the system is reliable and persuades them to adhere to it. Sorry about the long-winded nature of that. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to ask you to turn your microphone off now, please. Thank you. Mr. Hems, would you like to respond to this? I think the first question really is, where are we on this action?
So I know the team have been undertaking work in respect of that. I don't have an absolutely up-to-date position, but I will just have a look at something for you during this from some information that was being shared with me previously, but I don't have it open in front of me. So I think there is a bit of an understanding here in terms of some of those premises which effectively haven't paid fees, and we can very easily recover money by suspending the license. And I know work is being done, and we have done work in the past with premises who hadn't paid, where we have just literally said you can no longer do the following things. So it might be serve alcohol, or because effectively you don't have a license because you haven't paid the fee. And then in terms of the position around looking forward to make sure that we're not in that situation again, effectively, I think the team has had an issue in the past of some changes of resources. There is now a business manager in environmental health who is very much looking at the processes and the systems, and there has recently been a fairly fundamental review of fees and charges across the board, which I think has been reported recently into Cabinet. I think that is part of that process of making sure that we can justify our fees and charges and that they are accurate. So it's part of an ongoing piece of work around licensing in general. But if you just give me a moment, Chair, I will try and find the latest update from that, if that is okay.
I think,
Yeah, is that all right?
I think there was, sorry, I think one of our major concerns when we were looking at this in the pre-meeting was that if you look at the second paragraph on page 41, it says quite clearly that under the Licensing Act 2003, a licensing authority must suspend a premises license. So I think we need to be, we need to sort this out quite urgently. This is, causing a lot of problems here.
In response to that point, the first thing to follow on from what has been said in regard to non-payment of the fee, that we can suspend the license. We also have a system of debt recovery for persons who don't pay their invoice, so we can pursue any debt owed that way. In regard to the grace period, and I haven't looked at the legislation in detail, but it looks as though that's being used as a pragmatic approach to, rather than going straight to suspension, to give people an opportunity to sort it out where there's been an administrative error or something of that sort, and possibly something that we need to discuss with the officers that deal with the system is getting earlier correspondence out to them so that they understand what are the potential consequences of not renewing licenses at a certain time when they're supposed to do it, and they could potentially have their licenses suspended.
I think for me, the danger with that is that it's open to misinterpretation. It's open to different interpretations. So it could be that perceived by the public that people's licenses are given longer if they're a friend or whatever. And we need to be uniform across the whole this process about how we are administrating it, not just. I understand there is something about being pragmatic and trying to help people, and very often it's probably just forgetfulness. But I think we need to make sure we're not leaving ourselves open to attack and leaving businesses not knowing where they stand. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think when I made the earlier point, I meant that there needs to be that consistent approach, but earlier on, so that the license holders know what the framework is for renewing their license and potential consequences, but a long time in advance so that the worst outcome doesn't happen.
Thank you. Mr. Hems, and then we've got Councillor Cushing wishing to come in, and Mr. Platten.
Well, I'm happy to defer to councillor Cushing and then maybe we can wrap up at the end.
Thank you. Councillor Cushing, would you like to come in?
On the same issue, I mean, what I don't understand when I read this is if you're turning off an automated system, why wasn't there a robust manual system put in place to avoid this happening in the first place?
I think it's fair to say that the turning off of the automated system was not an orthodox choice per se. It was change of system from my recollection. And I'm not sure how much notice or understanding we had of that. But I think, you know, from a perspective of moving forward, which I think is you know, hopefully something that we need to, you know, that I want to concentrate on. You know, we will put in those robust systems. Unfortunately, I mean, in terms of the systems we use, they are systems that are provided by, you know, software companies. And so we can ask for things to be in the system, or we can say, this is, you know, this is how the system that they used to provide. If they choose to change the system and take bits out, which is certainly what happened in the move from M3 to Assure, because of the way they developed the system, then we are, you know, we can make representations into that. Unless we decide we're going to pay for something ourselves individually at significant cost, we can't necessarily dictate to them that they must provide that functionality within their software system. But I do accept that, you know, in terms of the manual systems that we put in place, that they need to be robust and they need to be able to reconcile through the information so that we can put these steps in more readily.
I mean, if you know you're losing an automated system, obviously there's a risk there that you're going to stop. You may not collect the payments which are due. So one would have thought if we didn't ask for it, but nonetheless it's been imposed on us. So I would have thought that would have been the reaction at the time. So hopefully going forward, that's something we will learn in the future if this happens again.
Yeah, certainly, and I think you know, with the appointment of the business manager who has got a particular focus on this at the current time, that does give us an ability to have someone who is very focused on process and systems, etc., for the service. It's why we introduced that post across environmental health, was to look at some of that process related activity and make sure steps were in place. And I think the fact that, you know, and I know it's unrelated, but the fact that we have done a full review of our fees and charges this year in a very thorough way indicates that, you know, that hasn't been done in that way previously for a number of years, indicates that work, you know, that confidence that I have that we are doing the work about process and activity, you know, it does give me confidence that we're doing things in the right way. But I take on board the comments you've made, Chair, if it's okay, because I can't find the exact information. But if it's okay, can I get an update for the committee next time in terms of progress on that and a full?
I think next time's too long. I think there's a danger of reputational damage
No,
to the
that's fine.
council. So I think a month is maximum that I can accept.
Oh no, no, absolutely, I'm comfortable with that. I can get you an update prior to the next meeting. It could be certainly within the next couple of weeks as to where we are at the current time.
I think we need to know, and I
Yeah,
think
no,
we need to also know that some kind of process has been put in place, that people are informed that we won't be able to just simply apply a 21-day grace period anymore. That legislation states we have to suspend.
No, absolutely. And I think the position that we all accept, you know, for those of us who have cars, and I think one of the things that's been levelled previously by licensees is, well, you didn't tell us. And actually, as a car owner, I know when my insurance is due, I know when my car tax is due, and you know, it's my responsibility to go and do those things. So I think, you know, we can certainly make sure that those notifications and those information are going out to people early, and then they have the responsibility to make sure that they are doing it. I know in very small number of circumstances that head office handle payments for, I don't know, is franchisee the right word, but those that are actually the premises And so that, so there are very small occasions where people will say, where we'll issue to a head office and the person doesn't know whether it's being paid or not, but we can cope with that within any system that we put in place.
I think that's the main thing, is that the main thing is to try and make sure we've done our part. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. It's like anything with car tax or whatever. There is a responsibility on the licensee as well. But I think we just need to be clear what our process is so they know what is expected of them. Mr. Platten, you wanted to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I share my colleagues' concerns about this particular item, and two questions were going through my mind in particular. One was the potential, if there's a risk of treating folk differently in any sense, that seems to me that raises the potential of some legal challenge, possibly. So I'm just raising that question as something to think about. And second, I'd probably be looking for some fairly tight project management over this. So what are the controls, the timelines, the oversight, the governance of this to drive it through to a sensible conclusion? So just a kind of questions / comments on perhaps a couple of things to think about to take this forward so that those risks are managed. Thank you.
Did I have if anyone else wanted to come in at this point? And if so, Councillor Penfold, then Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Boyle.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just reading up above that, there are some figures in the paragraph down, which says that initial findings identified over 204 premises which the council was uncertain whether annual fees had been paid, and says the subsequent review noted this figure's reduced to 154, with 83 being chased for payment, of which 38 are confirmed owing us more than 1 year. And the review is expected to be completed by the end of November 2025 for all remaining cases. As of July 25, the total outstanding fee income was 37,350. So the work is ongoing, isn't it? It definitely is ongoing. And I understand from the following paragraph that we can't leave things behind, but it would appear that there are numbers to this.
Yes, I think it shows that the work is started, which is why I started with my first question, because very often we've got an update at committee that something has actually been completed, which is why I started where I started.
And I'm grateful for Councillor Boyle finding the information I was looking for.
So I think, we know where we are. I suppose the question is, how are we going to get there to get to where we need to be? Councillor Holliday, did put her hand up earlier, so I'll come back to you gentlemen in a moment. But ladies first.
On a different topic though.
Oh,
I thoroughly
is it related to licensing?
No, I'm coming in.
Come
That's
back
why
to you then.
I'm
We'll just wrap up this licensing discussion, then I'll come to you first. Did either of you gentlemen have anything more on licensing? And then I think we need to put an action plan in place.
Just a quick comment. I think it may be about just tightening up the processes that we have. Take Officer Hem's point about car tax, but you do get reminders through email and through the post. So it's just making sure that those paying the license are clear about what our processes are, what the expectations are, when this, when the license is due, and what are the consequences of not paying this license within what timescale. That seems to be quite a straightforward thing to do, and maybe something that hasn't happened. So I'm not quite sure from the number of outstanding cases how much of that was down to functionality problem and how much was down to the licensees not paying. So I don't know.
I think that's a very fair comment, and I think that's a point well made by Mr. Hems as well. That there is an element of responsibility on the licensee as well, to make sure that they are, keeping it in touch with what they need to be doing. But I think our process needs to be clearer.
Yeah, we can communicate that there is a responsibility the other way as well. I think that's
And I think that we need to make sure that people understand that we can't give a 21-day grace period. We're not trying to be difficult as council. It's just the law. We have to abide by it. Can we have an update on what's happening and where we are going with this within a month? Would that be possible, Mr. Hems?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm just making some notes. So I think what you're asking for, just so I can make sure you're giving you the right thing. So you'd like an update on the outstanding, the numbers of outstanding by both remaining outstanding by both the volume, i.e. the number of licenses, and the value of those licenses. You'd like an update on the position around the documentation associated with license renewals to demonstrate that the grace period has been removed.
Yep.
And you would like an update in terms of the process associated with the issuing of license renewals to make sure that they're going out in both a timely manner and that those are clear, I suppose, in terms of the consequence of not paying your license fee.
Thank you. And I think there's one other thing which could be done by the next meeting. So, but it's our licensing policy will need a small update to reflect that by the looks of these papers, please, as well. But that can be done by the March meeting, that last piece. Lovely. Is everyone clear on licensing? Happy that we've got that one? Lovely. Right, Councillor Holiday, you wanted to bring up something else relating
Thank you very
to
much.
this report.
It's an excellent report, but I was wondering if we could have more information in the progress at a glance, could be actually more inclusive in terms of what, for example, the urgent recs are. For instance, because I had to pay, it's page 4 before you find out what service area the important recommendation is. Page 14 before you work out what exact part of the service area is affected, and page 20 before you find out about the important recommendations in AI. So I thought perhaps some of this could be brought forward to save one riffling through the papers and wondering what was going on, but that's been my problem, not yours.
I'm not saying it's not. I mean, it's something we can ask about, but yeah.
And also the update that we had, thank you very much indeed. 2 have been closed, which 2 have been closed? It would have been quite, there's a lot of back and forth. It'd be quite nice to save time. AI seems quite important, 7 important recommendations. I don't want to lose sight of that. And again, I was just trying to see where on the risk register that was captured, because even though they're the same risks as seen in other organisations at a similar stage, but they're still quite important risks, such as, you know, using unauthorised tools and those sorts of things. And I wondered if actually profile of that should be raised. And the section 106, I thought, was another area we should not let go unnoticed, because that's always has been in the past an area for us of some interest. And we did recently lose an officer, didn't we? So an important amounts of monies are included. So I think that profile of that should be increased. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's some good points there. I think one of the things I will come to your officer in just one moment. We had a conversation about the AI in the pre-meeting, because this is advisory work. It's not an actual audit. This is sort of trying to get ahead of the curve, so to speak. Although AI is coming at us like some kind of steam train on speed. So when we said we weren't sure that it was something that should just have that sort of, oh, well, it's, we're all right because we're in the ballpark. But there was a question we talked about whether how we find the resource to make sure we're tackling that, whilst making sure we don't fall behind elsewhere. What interested me was a lot of that advisory work had a due date at the end of January. And so first question was going to be, is that realistic, or is that a date that's just been plucked from the air? I mean, it could be work that's already ongoing. Mr. Hems, are you able to answer any of that? Sorry, that's quite a big. Oh, yes, he did. Sorry.
Well, my comment, Chair, was on section 106. So if you'd like to invite Mr. Hems to answer on the AI first.
So as you've stated, it is an advisory audit, and I think in part we need to just reflect on some of those recommendations to make sure, because as you already said, the use of AI and the benefits of AI are something we absolutely need to be on top of. So I don't know the position around those audits and how much progress has been made. I could certainly find out we will certainly be finding out progress, because Kay and I contact the responsible officers for each of those service areas and ask for an update on a monthly basis on those. And certainly my hope would be that those that are due by the 31st of January will have either been closed, or there will have been significant progress to their completion, such that we will understand an end date for them.
Okay. And these do appear to, if I'm not mistaken, come under your area as well, because they're down to Daniel and Kate.
Yes, and we'll use our existing processes to report those actions. I was going to come in, if I may, on the section 106.
Yep, absolutely.
As Councillor Cushing rightly pointed out, or I believe it was Holiday pointed out, sorry, one of the section 106 officer left the council at the beginning of October. A replacement has been appointed. They will be enrolled later this month or early next month, I believe. But they will need some training to get up to speed. So I have met with the team leader and prioritised identifying any section 106 grants that the council retains that are close to expiry, to make sure an action plan is in place to mitigate the financial risk of repaying such grants to developers, which they're entitled to claim with interest. So it's ongoing. It's taken longer than we'd like, but we are working towards a remedy.
I think there's something there about us not wanting, it takes a heck of a fight, as we all know, to get 106 at planning committees from developers. So it's really important that that money goes to the communities that we have fought for to make sure they can get the benefit of it. And I don't like repaying money we've managed to secure. I'm sure no one else does. Councillor Cushing, would you like to come in?
Yes, I'd like to come on AI, if I may. I suppose also to Officer Sharman. I mean, the other councils in Norfolk must also be looking at this risk, I'm assuming. I mean, are they putting any brains into this, and is there any benefit from NNDC approaching colleagues in similar councils to see what they are doing, to see that you can pool resources, particularly thinking of LGR coming down the line as well?
I suppose I know more about what my own host, because the consortium's hosted by South Norfolk, so I know more about what we're doing than maybe the others. Just passing conversations, I know that some people probably are using it to the same degree as us. At South Norfolk, we have Copilot and we've had training in it, and we have, you know, the safe environment to use it in all manner of speaking that we want to, and we in the audit team do use it for lots of different processes, and it certainly helps when you're summarising documents, doing research, writing nice emails for you, reading through documents and summarising them for you. It's brilliant. So it does help the audit process, and I think within South Norfolk they use it. Everyone uses it very similarly. I'm less sure about some of the others. I think one of the other councils I know is using it, but to the extent I don't know. But you're right, everyone coming together maybe and looking at how they use it under JLGR could be beneficial. Why not, you know?
It sounds a very sensible suggestion, you know, with the way that everything is moving. Mr. Platten, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Just generic comments about the whole pack, if I may. One question, one suggestion. The question is, going through this, I look at the responsible officer column and see the same teams and the same names cropping up a lot. So my question is one about capacity to be responsible officer for this, as someone that's experienced this kind of thing myself, just to seek reassurance that the responsible officers in this case have the capacity to be the responsible officer. Second, and this is a general comment across quite a number of the documents, is I am worried about date slippage, and I wonder whether something that talks about delivery confidence. So we have an implementation date, which is the target, and then potentially you have another column which is around what is the responsible officer's confidence that that will be delivered by that date. And I mention that because I've seen it work in other spheres pretty well, and it gives committees like this some confidence that of effectively it kind of helps you unpack the priorities of what's there and the responsible officers take on whether or not they're going to hit that implementation date. Because I come to committees and I look at this and think, I'm not really quite sure when that's actually going to happen, especially if the dates keeps slipping. So one question, one suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hems.
So in terms of that, the issue around responsible officers, so one of the things we'd found previously that there was a large number of people who'd been identified as having responsibilities for the delivery of the audit recommendation, and that they were scattered is not the right word, but they were throughout the levels of the organisation. It was felt that the most appropriate way to hold people to account was to hold those at an assistant director level to account. So being a responsible officer does not mean that you are necessarily doing the work yourself. It's that you are the point at which the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board and potentially this committee can say, okay, why are all of these not being done? It also makes life easier for my executive assistant, Kay, who chases these people, to be able to send emails to one person for multiple recommendations. So in terms of that issue around capacity, I don't think all of the work is falling on the shoulders of those individuals directly. But I think we are acutely aware as a corporate leadership team and management team that there is an awful lot of work ongoing, not least of which preparations for things like devolution and local government reorganisation. So those things and other workloads that are there, as well as additions to business as usual. So those things are, I suppose, of some concern to us. But part of the issue around contacting those assistant directors on a monthly basis is to say, where are you with this and what are the problems and issues with it? And so we are asking for an update on a fairly regular basis as to what are your timetables for completing this and what are the barriers. So we do, in theory, get some indication where there is likely to be slippage, and we ask for a justified reason as to why that's going to happen. Is
That's helpful. Thank you very much. And I just sort of thinking about capacity and just wanted to test and whether or not you were satisfied that there was sufficient capacity. And I understand the kind of single point of contact argument and channeling things through that. I do still think it would be helpful to have a clearer sense of the confidence in delivery of a target date. It may just be a personal issue, but it just in terms of things that I've seen that are considered to be best practice, if you set your baseline date of when you think something's going to be delivered, if you're going to adjust that baseline, then that's fine, but let's make it transparent, I think is my suggestion. So something that says, here was the original, here's what it's going to be, and potentially I think something that's I've found really useful is to see the responsible owner's assessment of how confident they are that you're going to hit that date, so that if it's something critical, committees like this can kind of examine that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Hems, but if that's a requirement in this paper, then would that not be down to the internal auditor as to whether that was included or not? Just asking, I don't know.
Together on getting the responses for the outstanding REC. So I guess if part of the response had some sort of percentage confidence within it, then we would just copy that into that latest response. So they could always add a confidence level, 50-20% at the end of the response or something maybe. But yeah, if Steve's happy with that.
I see no problem. I suppose in terms of that issue around capacity, it would be remiss of me to say that we are all sitting waiting for the next audit recommendation to come out to pounce on it. And there, you know, there is no doubt it's an exceptionally busy time at the moment. And I think previously, if I'm entirely honest, that audit recommendations were probably something that officers looked at when they got towards the bit where someone chased them and said, this is overdue and outstanding, being honest. And I think we're improving that. We are moving that forward in the process. And I think just coming to that bit about confidence. So effectively the dates that are, that come with the recommendation are part of the recommendation. So if you have something that's got a very high, you know, urgent recommendation, it comes with a set timetable. So it comes with must be done within this period of time. If it's, you know, a medium input, it comes with us, you know, is it 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months? So we're encouraging those that are looking at audit recommendations to challenge those dates and to say either I can't deliver it in a month because there's too much to be done, or it's just, and to go back and have those conversations with auditors, because I think as a leadership team, we see this being a process that should be beneficial to us in order to drive improvement, rather than being a situation of just saying we're not challenging because they're the auditors. So I do get your sense, but they should have been robustly challenged by the officers at the point at which they're agreed. I think that confidence of delivery is usually a position around external factors or factors beyond the control of the individuals, whether that be capacity elsewhere or other things. So certainly I think we can look at those dates in a degree of confidence. And I think or degree to which people have confidence. I think more importantly is that when those dates are moved, that they're moved with a degree of confidence that they will be delivered by those dates. Because one of the things that is from this committee, I think previously had been dates were moved and then moved and then moved and then moved. And I think we can't, as officers, we can't really accept that unless there is real justification in the background as to why those are there. So certainly I think from the point of view of confidence, we should be able to look at that and agree something with internal audit to deliver.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else on this report? So we're asked to note the change to the internal audit plan. Is everyone happy with the change that's going to be made? So that's the examination of the TA. Sorry, Teresa, could you everybody happy with that? Yes. Good, thank you. Right, noted. Thank you. Right, so we move on to the people who have been waiting very patiently at the back of the room. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know whether you want to come forward or whether you want to present from there, or we've got some space here if it's helpful. Everyone's going to be twisting round to speak to you. So committee may recall that we were asking about the new project management framework provision and how it worked. And these gentlemen have come along to explain it to us. I think they've been asked to cut short the presentation they gave to CLT, which was 45 minutes long. So a much briefer would be really appreciated. Not that we don't want to understand, and if there's something that today we think actually we need to know more about, we might ask you to come back, but if we'll take it from you. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Rob. This is David. We are part of a corporate services team. We are very small, and we believe that project governance is a key part of managing organisational risk. Probably worth just changing the phrasing a little bit. This is not a new project management framework. It's an existing project management framework that's been refreshed. Our role is basically to make sure that projects across the organisation are delivered to the highest possible standard, consistently, with clear oversight and accountability. We believe that that is very important. As I mentioned, we're part of corporate services. We work with all service areas across the whole organisation, alongside their project managers, assistant directors and directors. We individually manage some of the major projects that are being delivered. So things like the Faking Leisure Centre, the Waste Project, some of the Chroma programs of work. David and I and John and Erica, who's on maternity leave, actually handle those projects ourselves. But we also support others with the project management framework, reporting requirements, training, ad hoc workshops, process efficiencies, LGR strategy, and capacity and prioritisation. So it's quite a big operational program, project management, governance function that we provide.
Yeah, so kind of to go on to to reiterate Rob's point, that it's kind of a refresh of the project life cycle, sorry, that was already in existence. So it still has that kind of regimented process, from the proposal, the setup, and then through to project initiation, project delivery, and importantly closure as well, to make sure that we're learning any lessons from that and making sure that it is all kind of tied up. So what we've been kind of focused on initially over the last kind of, I guess, 3 or 4 months now, is kind of reminding kind of and refreshing some of those processes. So really importantly, one of the key kind of gateway decisions is the proposal document, which as per the existing framework needs to go through to CLT for sign off, and that is around resourcing, budgets, ensuring that it's kind of adhering to kind of corporate strategy as well. So we're working kind of alongside with the capital bids process as well to make sure that those are kind of being considered along with, just the resource, just the budget as well as the resource, particularly kind of looking at, resource implications on some of the key teams. So, teams like property services, they do involved in a lot of projects, comms as well, usually kind of communications, usually involved in a lot of projects, just making sure they're aware from the get-go so they can resource those appropriately. So that's one of the kind of key gateways that we're reiterating and making sure is in place. So all projects will kind of come to us, make sure that they are checked, and then go to CLT for that sign off as well. So we're not changing anything, we're just making sure it's presented consistently to CLT. We're also ensuring that monthly highlight reports are being sent to us for all large and medium projects. So they feed information into medium project boards, which are already in existence, where multiple medium projects are reviewed at the same time. Large project boards where each large deemed project has its own board, as well as the new major projects board, which Don chairs. We'll be reviewing kind of those sort of large, high risk potentially projects or high gain as well. So that information is now kind of coming in on a regular basis, and we're kind of getting a much clearer idea of all of the kind of project information as well, so we can better assist where our kind of help and support can be used. So yeah, ongoing with that, we're updating templates, making sure they're all fit for purpose. So kind of taking it step by step. As I mentioned, one of our next focuses is going to be making sure we've got more of a centralized way of getting that project data so we can view in almost kind of real time where our help is needed, as well as looking at kind of project closure, which again is something that's I think on our radar as well, that's often overlooked once the project's done.
And something else just around, I think, the earlier capacity conversation that we're also doing is working with all the service areas to actually assess their books of work. And that's not just community facing projects, that is internal projects. This is BAU, maintenance, those kind of things, particularly property services and estates. I've got a lot of projects that they are working on that take a certain amount of their capacity, but may not necessarily be a strategic or community-based priority. There's a finite team, as Don's mentioned, I think David as well, that we're working with. So we're trying to actually help each of the service areas restack their priorities and then work with CLT and management to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time with the finite resource that we have available to us. So our steps basically strengthen governance, improve transparency and reduce delivery risk. And we are open to any questions.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you for that. So I assume the framework is based on Prince 2 and old money, sort of a waterfall based project.
It's a hybrid. Some of the service areas are doing things more agilely as an organization. We do use the principles of Prince 2, but quite honestly, with some of the work that we do, depending on the size and scale and complexity and risk, Prince 2 in its entirety is just too heavy. It would crush the delivery, but there are principles, project initiation documents, scoping documents, timeline plans, risk logs, action logs, highlight reports, exception reports. We use the principles of Prince 2 without being too heavy-handed, because it's important that we have consistency in governance.
Thank you, because that anticipates my next question, because obviously there are different sizes of projects. So if you've got a big full Monty one, you may want the robustness of Prince 2 governance around it. But if you've got something which is a few thousand, then you'll want to move.
Painting the railings is not worth Prince 2.
Yeah, no, I get that. So I wanted to answer, how many projects do we have in total being managed in the council?
The last count on our master sheet, and this is of all sizes, so this is from painting a park bench right the way up to some of the big corporate pieces that are multi-million that were either in delivery or shaping. I think at the last count we had about 190.
Don't know if it's that high.
But a lot of those.
Medium and larges, so the ones that we're requesting them that are in progress. We've requested, I think it's 14 highlight reports. So that's current, medium and large projects that are live. There is a lot more in kind of the not started and proposed phase that will be coming kind of after money and budget and stuff. So hold on, I was just filtering there. I had the filters on for
This is part of the reason, back to what we were saying before, why we'd like to get to a point where all of the information that the organisation holds is centralised, so it's available in near real time. We've got a lot of information that we're manually handling that we then work with management to support. So we should be able to do this at the click of a button.
Yeah, 81 proposed and in progress and not started. So that's kind of, they've been proposed, they've been signed up, but they've not been started yet. That's for small, medium and large. And then just for in progress.
While you're looking, if I can ask, if I may ask this, so effectively you said they will use some form of gating, so they'll come back and ask for a bite of money for the next phase, and that presumably goes to a board that Officer McCullum or I don't know, it's the productivity in whatever board it is. Actually, you're the people who release the funding, are you, to do that?
To answer your question initially, it very much depends on the scope of the project at the point that it's been proposed.
So I took it the bigger beasts, not the
yeah, they'll tend to be staged.
Yeah, okay.
If I can just come in there, the major project oversight board is exactly that. It's an oversight board rather than a delivery board. Most of our major projects have their own delivery board of key stakeholders within it. The role of the oversight board is to basically make sure that that governance process is working, that any significant risks that aren't being mitigated or controlled by that board are being checked, that's happening and then escalated appropriately. That might be to this committee, it might be to CLT, it might be to full council, depending on the impact of that governance floor and the timings around it, because obviously GRAC does not meet as frequently as CLT or cabinet does. So the idea is we're not there to deliver, we're not there to release budgets, because that's done as a function of the full council and the delegation of the full council. We are there to ensure that those major projects governance functions are working properly.
Councillor Penfold, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I just refer back to our overview and scrutiny committee, where we've been looking at the North Walsham High Street Action Zone, Heritage Action Zone, I should say, and fantastic project, delivered some really successful outcomes. I think one of our concerns, and you probably picked up on this, was around evaluation and the fact that perhaps there wasn't an adequate evaluation framework for the project set in place at the beginning of it. And therefore it was difficult to measure the impact of some of those outcomes, particularly around heritage, which is kind of tangible and intangible. So my question is around whether you've picked that up from those other committees, but also how does that evaluation work on bigger projects when we are partnering with organisations such as Historic England in that case, where they may have a different set of strategic objectives to us?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So again, it depends on the size of the project, but if it's that was a large project, so we'd have a board in place that is mixed board, so it's not just an internal, it's an external parties board as well. So at the point of I guess before actual implementation, that's where you would be setting up those, again, in line with the conference too, within your pitch, you'd be setting up your your project initiation document, what the benefits are, what those are, and that would all be agreed by the board at that point prior to initiation, would be how that should have worked. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that we are ensuring that there's consistency of is how we actually shape the work that we do. The implementation of the work that we do should be led by the shaping of the work that we do, and sitting around the table with all parties to make sure that all bases are covered, and put that into a document and have that document screened by us so that we can present it with some level of certainty to CLT to actually approve makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of the projects that any organisation, whether it's public sector or otherwise, deliver that fail are ones that are generally not properly scoped. They're put into a system, they are delivered, they are riddled full of holes, they slip and they slide and they burn budget and go over and frustrate everybody. So what we're trying to do is make sure that that very initial stage is actually handled properly, because it helps the process that follows.
I think potentially in the North Walsham case, we were a junior partner in that, and that might have been the issue, that the evaluation that Historic England wanted, that wasn't clear from the beginning. So it was difficult for us to sort of say, hang on a minute, what is this? What do you want to do? And therefore, so if we're the smaller partner, maybe that.
Mr. Platt.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, super helpful. I'm going to qualify what I say, but my background's in central government, international programs and stuff, so my suggestions might not be directly relevant. But just 3 observations. So first, looking at the slides that you kindly sent around and the structure, the oversight board, one of the challenges with this kind of organizational structure is that sometimes joining up horizontally can be tricky across projects. So for example, on things like identifying where comms might need to align across different projects. So it was just a sort of suggestion or recommendation that that's something that's hardwired, if it's not already, into the processes. Second, the importance of lessons learned, and my experience of overseeing programs is often the PM might disappear because they're onto another project. Who's going to own the lessons learned exercise and make sure that that stuff gets embedded to the next project? So it's just a suggestion. I'm sure it's already in there, but just to make sure that you kind of drive that home, because it avoids obviously the same mistakes being made the next time, or failing to kind of consolidate on the benefits of the previous of earlier projects. And third is something about skills and culture. In my experience with projects and programs, that some people take to it, PPM and the kind of disciplines and the stuff that you've been talking about. Some people not so much. So it's just a kind of question about the extent to which that component of your approach is being embedded into how you drive this forward in the council. And then I had a point which Councillor Fisher touched on earlier. I'm sort of interested in how this connects to this committee and the extent to which, for example, risks pop out of your work and appear here. I'm still not entirely sure how the different committees connect in terms of oversight of projects, but with risk in the title here, I'm kind of interested in that channel. And in the rich picture, which I thought was great in your slide deck, I didn't see any connection to the GRAC there. So I may have just missed it, but it's something I'd be interested to hear how you see that kind of operating. Thank you.
There's a lot of points there for us to unpack. Do you know?
So just remember what the first, sorry, just remember what the first point was there. Trying to get answers in my head.
Horizontal, vertical skills.
This is the
lessons learned.
Yeah, so I mean, that is something we're really focusing on. So we've started kind of having weekly in some cases, monthly in others, working groups with the various different kind of key departments that are likely to cross over. At the moment, that's fairly informal for some of them, but I know for property services, who Rob's working quite closely with, that's something that's becoming very, very kind of formal. And with the light of kind of you assisting that and then passing that over and us receiving updates. Yeah, we're very, very aware that's kind of really key. Our proposal document, the form, in principle, when that is filled out prior to kind of it being signed off at all, you should have sign off from all of the various kind of managers of the teams that you're wanting to have involved. That's something we're kind of pushing for or pushing back when we receive proposals that haven't spoken to those other departments as well.
That's partly to make sure that there's awareness across the organisation of where different resources might be needed, and also at what potential point those resources are likely to be spooled up. So, for example, maybe that legal and estates need to work quite early on a project, and it's later down the line that property services and perhaps some external consultants might be working on some things. And actually to then tie into your other point, how a project is delivered, how it's packaged up, how it's turned into a piece of maintenance of BAU, who's going to look after that, so that we don't just have a cutting of red ribbon, project manager walks away, nobody's learned anything. One of the things that we have actually got on our phase 3, just the projects and programs team, is how we develop a lessons log library that can actually be used at a point that a new scope is put together, that we can look back at a library and go, well, we did something similar a couple of years ago. These are the great things that happened. These are the things that we need to improve. How does that actually feed into a new project process?
It's definitely a gap that we've identified that needs fixing, that needs doing properly.
Which is a classic part of Prince that we want to kind of pull back on, so that we're constantly learning, constantly improving, making things more efficient as we go along. And I think to the other point that I think was touched on earlier about things like AI and other organizations, David mentioned that we are constantly developing an internal project management working group, which will bring all the project managers together within the organization. But we are also looking at expanding that across organizations to Yarmouth, Kings Lynn, and others, to try and make contacts and see whether there are best working practices that can be shared, especially in light of LGR. And we're aware that there's a strategic North Star that we're heading towards, that we have to kind of work backwards from that position.
Sorry.
I have a couple of questions. So for me, there's something about yes, there's the bit about the immediate closure of when the project's finished, but also reviewing that project 12 months on and looking back at, did it actually deliver what you wanted it to deliver? And if not, why not? And I don't know whether maybe you're not far enough forward yet with.
I mean, I think in principle, the framework kind of does identify that. Anyway, you should have those benefits realization should have time frames. So that could be in 12 months time. Have we seen an uptick in what have you, with regards to the benefits? So that is all part of it. I think, as to Rob's point, kind of one of our later things we're planning to do is to kind of get that a bit more in the forefront of people's minds. So we have got 3 or 4 kind of projects that are at that point that require that closure. So we are going to be leading on that. We mentioned project managers kind of potentially disappearing and moving on to the next thing. That will sit with us for the time being, if the project manager's not around to finish.
And what we also have to do, picking up on your point about, benefit realization over the long term, we have to be quite careful as we are refreshing and rolling this framework out using matrix management, delegation of skills and training with our project management faculties within the service areas, that we don't retrofit or retrospectively over-engineer anything. So there's a delicate balance that we're constantly striking between how we recognise long-term benefits of existing projects that have been delivered versus how we ensure consistency and best practice and governance on the newer projects that are now at early stages of delivery.
At what point, if any, do you engage with members?
Question. So proposal portfolio holders, the proposal form has portfolio holders listed in there, so people should be speaking with portfolio holders at that point, as well as other councillors.
For me, the worrying word there is should be.
Yeah. This is we're introducing
Because
this,
part of my day job is I go and work in other councils, and where we see some of the most spectacular failures projects and the councils that have fallen over financially, there were no proper proposal documents put together, and there was no councillor oversight. So I think for me, that's something I really would like to see included.
Which is
this. So sorry, my phrasing there was so the framework says that will happen. Proposal document that will happen. What we're saying is that we're bringing that to refresh that and make sure that people are adhering to it.
Slide 4 in the presentation pack, the left-hand column really is that gating mechanism, which is around. There is an expectation that there is a document that's produced that has a sponsor or key person name on it that has been thought through, properly documented, countersigned, and then effectively given CLT for approval or for language.
Okay, I mean, that's the most important thing for me is at the end of the day, we are a councillor-led authority, and councillors should be, at the forefront of these decisions, just to make sure it's actually what council wants too, Councillor Cushing, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I'd like to follow up your points, Madam Chair, because I was a project manager and programme manager in the private sector. So following the point, who was accountable, every project would have a sponsor. So this is a sponsor who's ultimately accountable for delivery of that project and for the fulfilment of the benefits, whatever they may be. So a project would end whenever, but it may well be a year later, but they would still be held accountable for making sure they delivered. And it also comes back to your point about member engagement, because here it may well be that the sponsor is a member of the CLT, but they themselves should link back into, I would have thought, a cabinet member, because as you say, projects are instigated as part of policy, and it's really I expect if there isn't that route there at the moment, I suggest you might want to think about how you get that thread going through your projects. Should give you some accountability and benefits realisation as well.
Yes, do come in.
I just realised we missed something that was picked up on before, which is the hierarchy between the framework that we have, how we're operating it, how we're constantly developing it, and potentially the missing link with GRAC. We could have started mapping our framework or our refreshed framework out against the various committees and groups that are connected with the organisation. I think this is a good point for us to start that process and see where we create the dotted line with GRAC and how that would work. I'm more than happy to continue to represent or field any questions on an ongoing basis.
Chair, could I?
Can see Mr. Hems itching to jump in and stop us there.
No, I'm not. I don't wish to stop you, but I'm just conscious of the fact that you, as GRAC, you have me here from a perspective of the performance and productivity oversight board, and this council has put in place at the recommendation of a peer challenge 3 officer oversight boards. So I come and talk to you about what we're doing in terms of performance and productivity, and one of the others is a major projects oversight board. And so I guess the question is, without wishing to over-engineer a situation, particularly given comments earlier about capacity within the organisation, that perhaps it's the representatives, but I'm not wish to throw my colleague under the bus at all. But given that Officer McCullum is already here, that actually it's that route to be able to identify through the board the confidence that you're seeking in terms of where projects are and what's happening. But potentially by reporting, providing a report or some information or update on progress or against projects, and that we probably need to think about outside of this what that might look like, and give you some opportunity as a committee to comment back and say either that's adequate and it meets our needs, or actually we want more.
I think that's a good point. It might be that we might like to ask for a summary report from you guys to Don, Officer McCullum, to bring to us here, very much like you do, so that we have got sight of those, because at the moment we don't have sight of the big projects, and those are the ones that could create the black hole. So we should be more, at least have a route in, I think. Is everyone happy with that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think, yes, if Officer McCullum is already here, we don't want to be taking up your time unless we've got a specific query, in which case we can always ask you through Adam to come back. Does that work for the committee? Everyone happy with that? Officers happy with that? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Is everyone happy they've had their chance to ask any questions they wanted to ask? Thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
And very reassuring. Right, we move on. Performance and Productivity Oversight Board. Mr. Hems, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, you've had the papers. I'm conscious of your time and that you've got other items on the agenda. I think in summary, we continue to work towards improving the position around a number of areas and having oversight of a number of others in terms of making sure this council is progressing in the direction that it should be. And I think you can see from the report a number of the areas that we've been considering and looking at since the last meeting. I think you've highlighted 2 areas in terms of an area in terms of the audit recommendations where we're continuing to work, but obviously somebody at the end of the table keeps producing more audit recommendations that then become due. And I think we've seen a little bit of a position where we have kept pace with them, but just as of this moment in time, a whole load came due at the end of November, or several came due at the end of November. So the report you had most recently shows a little bit of an uptick, or at least not a downward trend. But we continue to work on those. And the other piece from my perspective that we are focusing on is in terms of corporate policies. So we're coming up, we looked forward for the entire year because we had a situation, I think, if you recall from a previous meeting, as many policies as we were dealing with, each month another set became due, and it was a rolling feast. So you couldn't see for the wood for the trees for progress, even though we knew we were making progress. So we've done the entire year up until the end of December, and we are making progress against that. But we're now at a point where we've just decided we will look at the next 6 months. So all policies due that come due in the first 6 months will go onto the list. So we'll suddenly see a big jump up, but we will start chasing those with officers straight away. So we hope that we'll get those redressed fairly promptly. I think the positive for me in terms of one of the things we've looked at is on complaints, particularly around local government ombudsman position. So we weren't out of step with other councils, but the ombudsman had found against the council on a couple of occasions and investigated some. We've done changes to our process and policy around that, and we're dealing with our stage 1s and stage 2s in a much more effective manner, in line with the local government and social care ombudsman. And I'm really pleased to say that last year, the period November to November, the ombudsman had a similar number of complaints referred to them by members of the public who weren't satisfied with our response to their complaint through our process, but the ombudsman had decided not to investigate any of them, which I think is a significant, demonstration of confidence in our process as much as anything. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions on the report that members of the committee might have.
Yes, that's something I noticed about the ombudsman, and I thought that was, a good reflection on what's been put in place and I saw that we're part of a pilot as well. I don't know whether there's anything that we need to know or can know about that.
So the local government and social care ombudsman does engage with a number of authorities, district councils and unitaries, to consider how they're going to update their code of practice and in terms of complaint handling. We've been fortunate to have been offered that opportunity for the last couple of times that the ombudsman has updated their code, and I think we are very positively engaged with that. I've been to some of the meetings. We very positively engaged with that alongside colleagues from other districts and other councils, in a way that I think has influenced the code in a positive manner. And I suppose most obvious that one thing that we looked at was the original suggestion that there might be a requirement to have a dedicated complaint manager.
Mm-hmm.
And from our perspective and from other authorities, I think the point was made, we don't get enough to justify having an individual that's their sole job. And I think that has been reflected in the changes to the code. So we have adopted a lot of the recommendations of the code very early. So we've been working with some of the templates that we have formulated in response to that. So it makes the job much easier for officers. We have within the last week launched the new policy and the system for officers. So the time scale for which officers have to reply has changed in line with the code. We'll trial that in the period up until April, and then the code effectively comes in on the 1st of April. So we'll have an opportunity to tweak our processes to make sure that we're really closely aligned with the code. One of the big changes for us, as well as there were some slight changes to the number of working days we respond that reflect the code. So for stage 1 responses, it goes down to 10 days, 10 working days for an officer to respond. For stage 2, it goes up to 20 working days. And I think that reflects the need for officers who are doing stage 2 to do a bit of an independent review. So you come to it cold rather than being involved in it from a service point of view. But most importantly, we've pushed the responsibility down within the organisation as per the Ombudsman's recommendation to, instead of being assistant directors doing stage 1s and directors doing stage 2s, it now goes down to service managers stage 1s and assistant directors stage 2s, with some quality control and sign off and checking in the roles. So I hope that will make the process easier for officers to be able to deal with. But yes, there is nothing unreasonable from our district council point of view within the code, and we've put everything in place to reflect that already.
Does anyone have any questions on this report? Obviously, Mr. Hems has sort of done a summary, but if there's anyone, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. something I raise in other locations, the corporate plan and the action plan delivery and the RAG rating. I think the 24 of the 30 actions at the moment are green, and 6 are amber, and 40% are process and not outcomes. So I was just interested in how you grade them, really, because you're grading 80% of the actions are green and their process. And how did you actually decide that that's the correct grading or not? Because I think sometimes some of us disagree with your grading.
So for clarity, it's not the board's grading. So what we have been looking at is, so we're an oversight board.
Mhm.
So from that point of view, what we're looking at is whether the report has been done, and then within the
Okay.
report, whether that application of, you know, that position in terms of have they been RAG rated, and does the narrative, you know, is the narrative relevant to the piece of work? So we're not actually going through and saying we don't agree with your RAG rating. That's for officers to establish. What we have been looking at is the position in terms of, is what you put in the narrative supportive of the position you've put forward? So and about consistency of that. So some of the information that was being put in in either a very so the annual action plan is effectively a retrospective look for the previous quarter. And it's very easy as an officer, and I'm probably guilty of it too, that I think, oh, what did I do last week on this? I've got to do this update. And so you reflect to today. So we're going back and saying, can you make sure, if you want to put stuff that's positive in terms of stuff since, put it in red text, so that we can make sure that the position up until that quarter report is in, but then the future is there. So yeah, I think in terms of the application of that red, amber, green, it was where people were saying that, you know, there are some problems with this, but it was appearing as green. So we were just challenging and saying, why are you saying there were some problems, but it's green rated? Or people were saying equally, you know, this is all on track, and it was being amber rated. So it was about challenging people and saying, why are you putting, rather than saying, we don't agree with the grade you've given it.
Any other questions on this, please? Councillor Boyle?
Wasn't actually a question. It was just a comment on page 6,343, looking at policies, and I was pleased to see the progress on the policies from, you know, July 24, where we had 127 behind, and we're down now to currently only 40, and I think that's an awful lot of work. And for us as an audit committee, I think it's a really important step forward. So I just wanted to raise that, because
I think it's a fair point. I mean, to write a policy, as anyone who's ever done one knows, it's not easy and it's complicated, and there's a lot to be taken into consideration.
And getting one's defences in early, that figure will go the wrong direction when we add in a whole load, because they are constantly becoming due. And so actually that position around that original figure was such that we knew that was looking till right the way through from July to the end of December. So we were ahead of ourselves, but I think it's important that if we can get ahead of ourselves and start getting those in before they become due, people have opportunity to go through them and start reviewing and rewriting. And if I'm honest, a lot of the policies don't need starting again. They are refreshers, they are revisits, they are consideration of whether they're still necessary and appropriate, rather than it needs fundamental rewriting. And by way of example, so I have one that comes due every year in November, which is it's just gone through committee. It's the changes to the Regulatory and Investigatory Powers Act. It never gets changed very much other than updates to the legislation. So, but it's always going to be on that list. So I feel a bit cheaty in that that gives me two, because I've got two policies, one to do with social media and one to do with Regulatory of Investigatory Powers, that appear on the list that I know are going to go off because they're simple updates to do. And but at least we know they need to be done and we can count them and make sure they're progressed.
Yeah, thank you. I just think the encouraging thing is that you have a system now in place, and it's okay. You say it is lumpy because more come on in lumps, but they're coming off. They are being looked at, and that's fundamental to good management.
And if the chair will indulge me, I'd just like to thank Kay Skinner, who's my executive assistant, because she has taken a system that was really quite complex previously, and stripped it down and got to grips with it, and is doing a lot of that work on a basis that she will fire stuff out to people saying what's happening with this. And so she does an awful lot of work on a monthly basis to get to grips with it and understand it. And I'm extremely grateful for her forbearance with the process, and also with her determination in terms of continually revisiting those outstanding or coming due policies, etc.
Yeah, please thank you from us, because it's these sort of the mundane, the everyday that keeps things tight. It's the simple, often the simple, boring stuff that can get missed and overlooked. So no, it's good.
No, I think it's very important, and because Kay has done a lot of work on other parts of this, you know, the work that comes to GRAC as well. So we should recognise her contribution and send our thanks to her. Right, if we have no more questions, we will move on. And Officer has joined us and is at the back of the room, very quietly waiting.
I am. Are you happy for me to stay here, or?
Entirely up to you, wherever you wish to speak to us from.
If people don't want to turn around, is it easier for me to?
Probably easier if you come up here.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't, thank you. Pleasure, thank you.
Right, I don't propose to go through this line by line, and I'm very conscious that this has been a long meeting so far. So what I would like to concentrate on or bring your attention to, this is just for noting the report and what we have been doing within the civil contingencies team in terms of incident response and the work that we do externally with the Norfolk Resilience Forum. An exceptionally busy year. A record year in terms of incident response, and a record year in terms of the amount of events that we've had coming through the safety advisory group. Obviously, the main thing for us, which was extraordinarily fortunate, was the coastal pollution issues resulting from which was a fatal collision, which people do tend to forget, between the container ship and the tanker on the 10th of March. And that took a huge, and I mean huge, amount of time up. And obviously a bunch of plastic pellets washing up on beaches from Yorkshire to Norfolk could have been one heck of a lot worse. It could have been properly oil. It could have been from both ships. It could have been absolutely catastrophic. So I'm very thankful that all we had to deal with was some plastic nurdles. And for the most part, the beaches, the public beaches of the North Norfolk have been fine. Our colleagues over in the west of the county were not so fortunate. Since this report was written, I've been contacted by ITOF, who are the International Tanker Owners Pollution Federation. That is the group that passes on their recommendation to the insurers. The insurers don't have to listen to them, but they do pay attention to what ITOF say. And they are planning on surveying and resurveying the beaches in Norfolk in the next couple of weeks, coming in on the Monday and Tuesday, the 15th and 16th of December. And that will be so that they can assure themselves that what is being done, or rather not done in our case, because we stopped doing with resurveying because there is nothing for us to do, is correct. As soon as they have completed those surveys, which are up and down the coast from Yorkshire and all the rest of it, we will then, with the agreement of landowners and other local authorities that have been affected, look to withdraw our online reporting tool, which people were very grateful for. But for all practical purposes, we haven't had a report come through there since the 15th of October, and that was for the East Riding of Yorkshire. So if we don't need to have that up there, then we won't. And as soon as we are comfortable with all of that, and we are comfortable with the resources which have been expended by Holcombe Estate, we've still been supporting those a little bit, then we will be able to underline it and then just basically give them the bill for everybody's time. And I know that I personally have 13 20-page logbooks to corroborate all the time that was spent on that. So a huge amount of thanks to everybody, and particularly to our IT department, for adopting something which was meant for reporting coastal issues, for something that then turned into something which was extraordinarily useful to a whole bunch of people up and down the east coast of England. So very, very happy about that. One big point to note for me, and I'm very sad to see that our senior flood wardens, Mike and Marie Strong, who were over in Wales after sort of 25 years, in fact more than 25 years, coordinating that, and for many more years before then just participating in the flood group Wales, they're standing down. They have made a huge contribution over the years. And in fact, Mike was one of my go-to people when I found out about the Community Resilience Maturity Index pilot. When I wanted somebody to tell me, does this look as though it would be useful? He was the guy I rang first, say, would you jump on a call and just check out, would this be useful to you? So I got them as somebody who had established plans and somebody who I knew wanted to put a community emergency plan together, and had those on the call, which is why we ended up going along with the pilot for the CRMI. The Community Resilience Maturity Index pilot, we were the first ones on there. They are profoundly grateful for everything that we have done. And I've just been advised this last week that they have now set up the Community Interest Company. So that's been formed, and they're now running the pilot version 2 in another 6 local authority areas with 94 communities. And they have been trying to get some funding through DEFRA, and they're certainly looking at getting some lottery funding to try and increase their reach, and that will help to upskill a whole bunch of people and improve the resilience of a variety of communities, not just coastal ones. It's not all about flooding. It's just about making people aware of what it is that they can do at grassroots. And I know certainly that I've been having conversations in the last couple of weeks with Cromer Town Council. They put together a community emergency plan on the back of that, and they're now finessing that. So none of that would have happened if we hadn't taken part in that pilot, which was very successful from our point of view, which took extraordinarily little of my time, which is just as well, given everything else that's going on. And we have got a bunch of improved and or new community emergency plans and flood plans off the back of that. So that was very happy that that's happened. The one thing that's causing me a little bit of concern is the sheer amount of events that are coming through the North Norfolk Safety Advisory Group. It's been a record year again. We know that we are likely to see even more of those as and when the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act 2025, known as Martin's Law, comes into effect. And in addition, due to changes in staffing with police and a new renewed focus, understandably, there's likely to be more events coming to our attention through the Safety Advisory Group than ever next year, and then another, and then another. And this is against a backdrop for me of local government reorganisation and constrained budgets. I was, again, since this report was written, been on a webinar, and I had the opportunity to ask the regulator, the security industry people, what they were planning on doing for safety advisory groups and how they saw that interface working. And sadly, they did advise that they have absolutely no budget to cover what will inevitably be additional administrative costs for all safety advisory groups. So myself and other safety advisory group chairs are working hard together to streamline the administrative processes, partly in preparation for local government reorganisation, but also because we know that there will be changes as a result from Martin's Law, and we have to prioritise things. Everything that we do is risk-based and where things need to be, and we always look to prioritise everything. So it's pretty much the day job, really. that's an overview. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. Having been at the sharp end of much of your work, I'm very grateful to you for what you do and what you did during the summer, especially with the pellets, and also what you always do with the fire, with the flood wardens. I had a couple of questions. We've talked about fire risk, which is always troubling. I thought it was going to be a problem this year, but it didn't actually become. But a couple of years ago, as you know, it really was. Field fires were very distressing. And I did speak with the one fire prevention in the county, officer in the county, and I got some details of what they're doing in Dorset. But there's not any support here for fire prevention or readiness, apart from what you can borrow from elsewhere, which is slightly concerning. And the other question was about communications breakdown, because whether that should have its profile raised, because we had, for example, an internet cable cut in by mistake in one of the villages in my ward, and all the commercial premises were off for 3 weeks. And there was a lot of, in hindsight, you know what you do immediately, but it's very expensive. And so I was wondering if there should be more emphasis on communications breakdown. And I know that most places are served from different angles, so it's probably not going to be a total breakdown for a community, but it could be a partial breakdown, and that could be the commercial hub of that community. And I wondered if there's any thought that we should be giving to that. Thank you very much.
There is a formal, you'll not be surprised to hear, a formal risk process for this. So Norfolk Resilience Forum routinely goes through all of the risks that we separate out from the central government ones. I do not know that I've specifically seen one around and about communications, but there's a couple of hundred that we look at. From memory, I think it's something like 124 that we look at within Norfolk. There's quite a lot of them. What I can do, because I don't know the answer to this, Councillor Holiday, is I will go away and ask and check when that is due for renewal. And one of the things that we do, they say, well, how has this affected us? When was this last an issue? And if it isn't on there, and I'm not familiar with this particular incident, I would like to talk with you later just to find out what the impact of that was, because it maybe that is something that we can look at. It is difficult. The way that the risk rating process works is you look at how something is likely it affects against a whole raft of things, environmental and economic, as well as social and psychosocial, etc. And there is a scoring that comes along with it. So how likely is it and what's the impact? And only if it reaches a particular threshold is there then subsequently a plan which is put in place specifically to address that particular issue. It may be that it wouldn't rate high enough anyway, but I can certainly ask the question and I will come back to you on that.
I think interesting questions. And fire, I mean, this is just to see a lot of smoke on the horizon is very frightening. You know, when we get the train fire, I often wonder why we're still allowing steam trains at times, but I do love them.
Which reminds me, I forgot to answer your question. I did raise the question of fire, and we have had some changes in staffing, and there literally in the last 6 weeks, there's been another change. So I will now go back to my new contact and say, what's happening on community fire? Because I am very much aware that things were extraordinarily uncomfortable when I was out at Ashmanhill. And as a result of climate change, it's only more likely to happen again. And we are still, astonishingly, given the amount of rain that we've got at the moment, technically in what the Environment Agency calls prolonged dry weather, which is one down from drought. So we are set up for, if next year becomes hot again, we are set up for spate conditions for Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service and the other fire and rescue services around the country. And I did raise at the time, hang on a minute, well, we're not learning the lessons that why haven't we adopted the sort of stuff that they do in hotter countries? Why aren't we learning from what they did in Australia? Why aren't we telling people don't throw your bottles into hedgerows? Why haven't we got to you can't go barbecuing in the open type stuff in the UK? And I suspect that that is the way that things will be going. It's just that it takes quite a long time to steer the ship when it's not your agency.
Officer Hems, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, Councillor Holiday, I think you said that that internet outage had affected a number of commercial premises. And I think certainly Alison, Officer Sayer would be interested in those businesses, because one of the things that sits alongside that that blanket of security under which we all survive in terms of the emergency preparedness is around business continuity and promoting business continuity into businesses. So whereas we can, and I should probably explain, so I'm also the deputy chair of the Norfolk Resilience Forum. So I sort of have an external role to my one at the council in part. And certainly we do look at those risks, and there are a multitude of risks that are considered, although I suspect it's probably covered under just a general telecommunication risk and communication risk. But absolutely, we look at the potential for widespread outages and things like that through the telephone system. But we also look to encourage businesses to take that responsibility for themselves. I am conscious, because of the issues we have unrelated to business continuity, that a number of businesses within Norfolk don't use the normal sort of wired IT system, so they will use sort of satellite related internet. And so there are options for those businesses to try and either protect themselves from outages or have an alternative provision that probably is as reliant or doesn't rely on the wired system. But certainly, again, it comes back to that issue I raised earlier around response, those businesses taking responsibility as much as anything else. Thank you.
I think it is about resilience too. I had a couple of weeks ago, I had a blackout at home. Found all my torches didn't work, so I went out and purchased some, which I was very grateful for last night when there was another outage. Anyway, I think thank you very much indeed for that report. I think one of the things that I've particularly noticed, and I suspect other councillors have, is the updates from the department, keeping us informed, things like when the nurdles appeared. It was just so helpful, because then we didn't have to bother you. We've got the information. And it sounds like you had your hands more than enough full to have 40 councillors ringing up saying, what about those? So I'm really, really pleased. And thank you very much, because I think that was something we asked for last year, was more information, so we didn't bother you when these things happened. And I think, like you, I'm very sad personally to see Mike and Marie giving up, because they have worked tirelessly for the community, and particularly in relation to flooding, for a long, long time. So thanks do go to them. Right. Thank you very much indeed. I am very, very conscious that it is now 4:10. So the risk register is the next item. I suggest we confine ourselves to really important questions at this point, but it is the risk register and it is important that we review it. That's right. Thank you very much, Councillor Penfold. Right. The risk register. Does anyone have any questions they would like to raise on the risk register? Mr. Platten.
I was wondering if it might help if I wrote in. So I've got a few observations on it, and I'm conscious of time. But just as someone who's operated with risk registers in central government departments, that I recognise the comments may not be directly relevant here, but just some suggestions for how we might drive a bit more value out of them as a product. So if that would be helpful, I can set some thoughts out on writing and fire them in, rather than spend 5 or 10 minutes running through some points now. That would be helpful. Yeah. Yeah, will do.
Yeah, certainly we'd be grateful for any assistance in terms of improving what we're doing. So yes, recognise that, we continue to, as an authority, we're always going to look to try and improve the processes and the activity that we do. So yeah, great.
Could I ask every sector assaults? If you were going to say them now, we'd all hear them. So I don't see why we shouldn't.
No, it wasn't meant to. It was only meant so that we could look at them and make sure they were recorded properly, but absolutely. Adam, when you receive, maybe if Mr. Platten, if you send them to Adam and then Adam can send them to all of us at the same time. Councillor Holiday.
I think the capacity of the IT manager comes up on a couple of occasions, and cybersecurity, IT management, and I think somewhere else I can't get my hands on it this minute, but I wondered if that was, if we were paying sufficient attention to that. Thank you.
And I think that also comes up with what we were saying earlier about AI. That all comes together, doesn't it?
If I come in on that, yes, there are quite a few actions. Obviously, actions will be spread amongst the wider IT team. It doesn't fall on just one officer, but I think that's a valid concern because probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenges of LGR will be IT systems integration, and there'll be even more demand on that team. In terms of LGR and IT, we have named an officer for a working group that's working up until the date of the Mind 2 decision to share information and understand more about what the systems are. It's not about system redesign, where officers, not just in IT, but across the council, have been nominated for such roles like HR, statutory licensing, interactions with statutory bodies, where those officers have been nominated. We've also providing assistance to those teams should they need it to backfill those roles while they're partly involved in LGR, because we are concerned about officer resilience during this time. I didn't attend the GRAC pre-meeting because I was attending a DCN meeting with a chief executive who'd been through unitary process and one that's currently going through it. And that was one of the main problems is officer burnout during LGR. They arrive on vesting day and they're exhausted. And that's something, an ongoing risk that needs to be considered as part of the risk register.
Absolutely. I think it's a very important point because it is incredibly taxing. I only had one, sorry, Councillor Cushing. You might get in there before me, so save time.
I'm just going to go to page 93, which is CR10, housing delivery targets. I had an exchange with Councillor Brown, who was very helpful in Cabinet on Monday, asking about the sign-off of the local plan and asked him about the risk of the government imposing their target of 932 a year, which he thought was a very real risk indeed, as opposed to 557. If I look on the right-hand column there, it says that current delivery average is 87%. I thought that might be quite helpful to actually have that in real numbers, actually what we are delivering a year. Is that 87% of the 557, which my maths tells me is about 484? That sounds rather a lot from what I gleaned from portfolio updates, but I'm happy to be wrong on that. But overall, that if you look at the likelihood of the impact being 8 and being amber, that strikes me as being overly generous to me. I'd have thought that ought to be still red. That's my view. But
I would agree with you.
So the colours associated with the with whether it is a red or an amber or a green are associated with the risk score. So there is a threshold between which something is. So if a score is over X, and I can't remember it, I think it is.
It's a likelihood over the impact, isn't it?
Yeah. So if the score is above a certain level, then it will receive that colour coding. And I can't for the life of me remember what the score is, but it is somewhere within the matrix. So you effectively, it's not a question of a subjective assessment. It is an issue of what that likelihood times impact reaches. So from that point of view, it's assigned within the system rather than a subjective assessment. And I think the position is on this risk register is that, you know, on quite a lot of them, the likelihood of something isn't going to change. But on others, you know, sorry, yeah, we can impact the likelihood or the impact. We can't necessarily change some of those. So we know LGR is going to happen. So the likelihood of LGR happening is there. So we have to mitigate the impact score in some respects. So I think in terms of the color coding of it, it's not necessarily something we've picked. It's where it fits within the scheme. So I think green is under 6, or is it? Yeah, green's up to 6. Amber is between 10 and 15. 10 and 15 and above is red.
I kind of get Councillor Cushing's point on this. I think maybe we need to relook at the likelihood and the impact, and those will then make it go up to a red, theoretically. Because if we are, you know, forced to look at 900, the chances are we have something called the sea around us, and, you know, AONB, we just don't have the land to put all those houses on.
Yeah, I'm happy that we asked the officer to revisit that figure, but that's that officer's assessment at this time. The risk will change over time. I think the danger is we say it might happen in the future. What might happen in the future, and is that going to, you know, that might then impact. So scores will go up and down as things fluctuate. I'm happy to ask the lead officer for it to revisit and look at it again. But that is his assessment at this time.
I think that's all we can ask for, really, isn't it? Yes, by all means.
I mean, I'm assuming it's the residual risk score, the one actually that we're looking at here. So you're saying that the impact, well, that's subjective, isn't it? It's not defined by any process. Any of these are subjective by nature. So I'm not saying whoever set this, his subjective judgment may be that the impact is only 2, but my view, giving everything that I've heard about this, I'd rate it as being a lot higher than that, which I'd have thought would still push it back up into the red spectrum. And that assumes that we are actually building 484 houses a year, which again strikes me as high, but I'm pleased to be corrected on that. But I hadn't picked up from any of the other full council reports that we're building that many houses or have built that many houses in the last year.
No, I don't know. I can't answer you that one at this stage, but I'm happy to go back to the officer and say, could they revisit and have a look at the score for this risk?
Thank you. Any more questions on the risk register? Okay. I had a question about the next item and why it was actually on the agenda.
Sorry, Chair. I think there were some recommendations around some removals as well.
All right, thank you. Which page? There were, I remember seeing them.
What's page 8?
So it's, yeah, I think it's at the top of the agenda 13 page.
Here we are. I've got them,
Yeah.
page 86 for members of the committee. The committee is requested to note the report and to remove certain risks from the register with residual risk scores that have met their targets. So we had CR 009 for procurement. I understand we've now got an officer, or there's somebody coming on board. Is that correct?
We do have a procurement officer, and I think it was around the introduction of the new legislation. And we also have an internal audit undertaking.
Excellent.
As well. So at the moment, the recommendation is to remove it from this register, but obviously as part of the regular CLT review of this register, if we felt the risk increased again, we would consider proposing to reintroduce it. But it was this is a housekeeping exercise to tidy it up so that less make the reports from committee slightly shorter.
Okay. The poor reputation of the council in the community. On what grounds are we proposing to remove that? I mean, I like it being removed, but I'd like to know the grounds for it being removed.
So I think the original risk was identified as the council is perceived as inefficient, unresponsive to local need and or not transparent. And I think the sort of position that we find ourselves is that we have a clear and robust governance framework, and that we have got our communications strategy and approach, and that we have all of these performance management activities. So the things you've heard about today and the productivity and oversight board, it's quite a broad catch-all risk, if I'm honest.
I was going to say, it's not a very quantifiable one, is it? Because unless you go out and do proper reviews of the community.
So I think the proposal was to remove what was a very broad risk, and then to consider at some later stage, if there were specific issues that came forward, we would generate a corporate risk associated with those. Because at the moment, you've got everything lumped into one, and how do you quantify the risk? How do you what's your corrective action to try and mitigate a risk that could come from from a decision about so and so, or a position around council tax increase, or anything under the sun that people could go. And I think we just felt it was so broad that it was almost impossible to then understand how you mitigate such a broad risk, but also almost impossible to then ever get to a point where you've got it fully controlled.
Okay. Fakenham Leisure and Sports Hub Flash. Sorry.
I agree with what you've been saying, Councillor, but then the reason you're removing it is because you've successfully mitigated to the target level. Well, what you've just said is that you can't successfully mitigate because it's too complicated, multifactorial, and there's too many different mitigations. So by all means remove it, but shouldn't you remove it for a different reason, i.e. it's too complex and needs to be redefined into something that is easily measurable, and then I will be comfortable with your recommendation.
I think the risk as it was sort of set out there, we probably have put as many controls in place as we can for it in terms of the elements that are set out in the report. But I do agree with you, we probably need to reflect that the corporate risk associated with specific activity ought to then be identified where appropriate.
Thank you. Fakenham Leisure and Sports Hub, the Flash.
So effectively, we had this funding window that was incredibly tight. It was why it was on as a corporate risk. We're now within that funding window in terms of the project timetable, and government have just announced that they've relaxed so we had to be finished by 31st of March 2027. The timetable took us to December. Government have now announced that they're not expecting us, they're extending the deadline from 27 to 28.
Okay.
And I'm hoping I will be, or you can all swim in the pool if you buy a membership well before that.
One would hope so. Sorry.
I accept that. I just think it is the largest infrastructural project this council has had since the REEF project. I'm just wondering whether it is a very tangible delivery on that, unlike the reputational one that we just discussed, whether that is, we should be taking that off the register at the moment. So
But
something could always, any project, something can always come in and skew it off course.
So there is a separate risk register under the project for this. So from an individual risk register, that risk register that's now handled by Alliance Leisure Services on, as part of the project delivery, remains there. And I'm sure if there were any significant risks that came up as a result of that, we'd be flagging them in and putting a new corporate risk in. I think just for the purposes of, yes, I absolutely accept it's one of the biggest projects that we've run, and I think if I didn't have confidence in where we were along the process, I'd be saying keep it in. But I think what we're doing is we're going to be reporting the same level of risk every time, because all the risks are, in terms of timetable, have gone away. It might be that there is a different risk that we need to consider around Fakenham Leisure Centre, unrelated to the position around the inability to meet government timetables, because we're always going to be able to meet a date of 2028.
It's just about the funding. It's not about the project itself. I'm going to have to say something I really didn't want to have to say, but I might have to ask Councillor Fletcher to come and take over chairing the meeting in a minute, because I have a very, very hard stop at 4:30. So just be aware, Councillor Fletcher, because I don't think we're going to get through the rest of the agenda in 3 minutes.
I don't know whether, did you have a?
No, Mr. Platten, if you've got a question, ask it.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Fletcher could come and take over.
I wonder whether part of the solution here is to provide a little bit more of a richer view of the reasons for removing the risks from the register in part of the reports. And that might be nuanced around things like, so for some of these, I think there's a connection with the project management conversation we had earlier about what's the way of ensuring, for example, that poor procurement doesn't bubble back up. It's gone into business as usual and that's being managed fine. For others, it's because it's changed into a different risk or whatever. I just wonder whether that might make for a kind of easier ride on this committee if there are risks that are being recommended to be taken out. There's just a little bit of fuller explanation and how that transition is being managed, that might help. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got CR 040 Management Information System. Failure to complete development and maintain when in use.
So the system's now up and running and being used, and it is back to that business as usual position. So from that perspective, we are, I think we are comfortable that the issue around not being able to implement it has gone because it's there.
Lovely.
And the bit about maintaining when in use, it has been developed under a platform which is a standard Microsoft product. And so I think there are David Kingfisher, who you met earlier, has developed it, but he's trained a number of other people across the organisation to use and maintain it. So there is breadth there.
Excellent. So are all committee members happy then for these items to be removed from the risk register? All those in, seconder please. So Councillor Boyle, and then all those in favour.
And we'll take on board the points about that richer picture for.
I think that's a very good point.
Yes, thank you. It's useful.
Just makes sense for everyone. Right. Right. Thank you. Procurement exemptions register. I mean,
each GRAC I bring forward the exemptions. There's two. If anyone has any questions, I'm quite happy to speak on them.
Does anyone have any questions on those two exemptions? Thank you. I think we can not worry too much about the work programme. There is quite a work programme coming forward and we are continuing building on that. The only other item on the agenda was the National Audit Office letter, which I thought was quite a flimsy letter that they sent back in some respects. It to me says that they have got concerns, but they want to look at them after the horse has bolted. And I think we should probably go back to them and say, well, shouldn't you be looking at them proactively rather than reactively? That also in light of the DCN report that's come out again now. I don't know whether any of you have seen it, had a chance to read it, but that also backed up exactly what we said before, that these changes don't deliver financial savings and are or not likely to deliver financial savings and are likely to be costly, which is what we're talking about in the first instance. What I would propose is to draw up a new letter to send round to the committee for your approval before it goes out. But Councillor Cushing, you wanted to come in.
Happy, sorry, let's just point out, actually, we've jumped over item 14, but I'd be happy if you wish, if you're in a rush to carry that forward to the next meeting.
Sorry, which is item 14? Oh, yes.
Can I just come in there, Chair? Item 14 is there for reference. It's the policy that was adopted 12 months ago, and there's no proposed changes.
No comments on that. No?
I have to say I was very surprised to find it in the agenda without having seen it beforehand. If comments were wanted on it.
No, there weren't. It was just there as an appendix to say there is the policy. The report that preceded it was, so I don't think it was a separate agenda item. It was part of the item 13.
Councillor Holiday.
The risk register earlier in the agenda, so that, or could we mix them up each time, because we don't meet that very frequently, and the risk register wasn't there for the first meeting I attended, and then it was, so not to spend as much time on it today as we perhaps could have done.
If members
be
would like to
grateful with that.
continue, there's absolutely no reason why Councillor Fletcher couldn't come and continue the meeting. His vice chair is, if you would like to go on the risk register.
No, I don't think I do particularly, but I think we'll run out of steam, but it'd be quite nice if it was earlier in the agenda when we were a bit fresher and we could spend more time on it. And then some of the other agenda items could receive a little bit less attention, but that would be.
I think we'll probably always have the internal and external auditor first, but we could bring it forward after them. Anything else, anybody? I'm sorry to have to run. Really am. Mr. Platten, you look like you've got a question.
Very quickly, there might be some other target audiences for that letter, potentially. So in addition to NAO. So
if you've got suggestions,
Yeah.
please let me know.
Yeah, will do.
And then I can circulate to
Yeah.
the whole committee before we send the letter out and make sure everyone agrees. Thank you very much. That ends the meeting then. No need to exclude press and public. Thank you very much. Just realised I've left my coat and hat downstairs.